Welcome back to segment 2 of the 2021 Builders Challenge at the First Nations Housing Conference. Well, we're going to be going back very shortly. First of all, thank you once again to Sulookout Home Hardware for helping us out with this whole thing. Now, Andrew, I think we're up for a winner on the Kahoot contest, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a Fitbit Versa smartwatch that somebody has won. So, okay. Well, our technical drive, we get a drum roll for this as to who won the first one. See, you have to get the Kahoot app up and going and then get your code words in it from the last contest. And at the end of today's show, we'll do another code word for Kahoot. Then we draw right at the end of the hour. And we'll announce it. Let's see. Do we have something coming up? Kahoot winner. Oh, I see something. You got a name in the chat there?
Yeah, it's Creative Valbacks.
Creative Valbacks. Okay, Creative Valbacks won the Fitbit Versa smartwatch. And stay tuned because, as I say, at the end of this segment, we'll go in and do that. Now, let's see. Builders Challenge, groundwork and footing. We got all kinds of strange things on the screen here. These are all the people who put their names in. So, and had correct answers. So you had to answer questions and get that in. So I see that people are participating. Let's get more of that going and we'll have more challenges. Now, of course, the whole challenge is answering questions about the segment we just showed you. So we're going to show you a new segment right now. And in fact, it's any more homework to do before we go over there? I think I got it all out. Yeah. Let's go back to the site and continue this build. Home Hardware, delivering on time, and they place it where you need it. Welcome back to the Builders Challenge. And in this segment, we're going to be dealing with framing for the deck and for the ramps. But first, let's get our lumber organized.
So our builder, Corey, here has organized the material in different lengths and different sizes of the dimensions so that he knows that he's not going to be cutting into something that will need to be used for something else. It's a good way of organizing any kind of job site materials so that you either know that you've used it or that it's not being misused later on. In this clip here, we can see the contractor laying out the trimmer boards, marking out the 16 inches on center, and nailing the whole assembly together to make sure that they've got that platform built. It's not a very big platform, so it's easy enough for the three of them to lift it up out of place and then put it on top of our posts and beams.
We don't glue a deck together, but we do use a lot of fasteners. That means nails, screws, even bolts. Hey.
Oh. So typically with framing, we like to use nails because they have a better shear strength. Screws are really good for holding things together, but if there's ever any kind of force driven down onto the side of them, they can break off, which creates an issue. But because they are holding things together really tight, it takes quite a bit of force to snap one off. But with a nail, you have a lot of shear strength.
You could build a whole deck with an ordinary hammer, but this crew is using nail guns. Now I want to take just a minute to talk to you about using a framing nailer. There are two ways to drive a nail with a gun: bumping and triggering. Bumping works well with short roofing nails, but can cause problems with long framing nails. The nail may not penetrate all the way into the wood if the gun is not held firmly against the surface when the nail is fired. It can end up standing proud, and you'll have to nail it in by hand. Holding your gun tight to the board, then pulling the trigger assures that this long nail will go in flush to the board. But even that does not guarantee a good nail joint. You need to firmly hold the piece on the back so that the nail cannot push it away. So firmly holding the back piece, firmly setting the gun on the front piece will give you a properly driven nail every time.
Here's a shot of the box of nails. One thing you want to make sure when you're using treated wood is that you look for the label that says ACQ approved, which means that the nails aren't going to rot out in your treated lumber.
Until things get locked down, the whole deck can get out of square and give you no end of problems. A rectangle can have perfectly equal sides but still be pushed out of square. So here they nailed down the house side of this frame to the inner beam so it would not move. Then they measured the two diagonals of the deck. Things are square when these two measurements are identical. Notice how they simply hammer one end. That makes one diagonal longer and the other shorter. Keep checking both diagonals until they measure the same and you have it perfectly square. Fasten down temporary corner bracing to lock it into square. This is particularly important if you're going to toe nail down the joist to the beams, as that can easily move things sideways. Now let's look closely at driving screws. Why is he having so much trouble getting this screw into the board? He has two problems here, lineup and leverage. The difficult position does not allow him to get his drill bit perfectly in line with the screw itself, and trying to drive at an angle does not allow the square bit to sit fully down in the socket of the screw, so it bounces out easily. In addition, he's unable to push very hard, which doesn't help to drive the screw, but does help to keep the driver bit all the way down into the socket of the screw. Look carefully here to see how the driver is lined up with the screws, and check out how much body weight they're applying to hold the driver in that socket. Attention to lineup and body position to get your weight working for you rather than having to use muscle is what you need to drive 200 screws in an afternoon. If you're still having trouble with the driver popping out of the screw head and it's not just a worn out driver, try triggering on and off. Now how can that possibly help? When you turn off the trigger, you stop the twisting action, so your weight will push the driver back to the bottom of the socket. Trigger back on, you've got a better grip, you get it to turn a little bit. If you turn off before it pops out, it'll reset. So by triggering on and off rapidly, you manage to get the best grip possible in a difficult situation, like driving a screw through a knot, or you're just in an awkward position and you can't line it up perfectly. Toe nailing is where you drive a nail in on a steep angle, basically to stop a board from moving from side to side. And it's called toe nailing because we often use our foot to hold the board in place while we hammer on the other side of the board, driving the nail in. And of course, if you miss, you nail your toe. Now, Corey's going to slow down and give us a tip on how do you start the nail on such a steep angle.
Okay, so a little bit in, a little bit up, and then lift it.
All right, so another little helpful trick here is building a jig for cutting your 4x4 posts so you can repeat that cut as well. The importance of this is making sure you've got as accurate of cut as you can make. Sometimes it's a little scary making the cut because you're going to have to come in from two sides, but making a jig where you've got a flat surface on the whole top here allows you to run your circular saw across here, acts as a guide, and you can reuse this multiple times to cut your posts. I'll do a little demonstration on how to make it work. So because your circular saw, not a skill saw, has a certain offset from this guide plate, typically they're about 1.5 inches. So if you've got 1.5 inch piece of wood, which most of your standard dimensional lumber is, you can use that as a guide if you've got your post marked. Here's our demonstration post. So I get my guide, I've got arrows pointing up, so we know that that always has to be up. You slide that over there, put your 1.5 inch block up to your line, Bring this up to your line so you've got it in line and it's nice and flush. Then you can take your screws, tack this block into place. And then when I make my cut, I've got this to guide straight along the edge of this surface here. And then that cut is repeated. And it's a nice straight cut. You're not going down on an angle, because it can be kind of a bit of a challenge cutting on a weird angle when you're up on top of a platform or something like that. You will need 2 people. This upper piece, depending on how long it is, you're gonna need someone to support that so that it doesn't fall down or hurt anybody.
We've been talking about nailing and screwing and getting these boards to take shape. Now in the next section at 3 o'clock, we're going to talk about cutting these boards and give you tips on saws. But for the moment, we're going to jump over to the conference and join Andrew live for prize time and questions and answers. Oh, it's nice to get in out of the cold. Well, we've just seen another step in building this deck, and particularly using some of the tools and some guides to make it work. So I hope that's helped you out. Now, Andrew, let's see, we need to thank the Sioux Lookout Home Hardware Building Center always, because they supplied that immense pile of lumber that you cut down to toothpicks. Okay, this is the challenge 2 that you just watched, and we need to give you a code word for the building challenge number 2, focus. You write down the code word focus and enter that into your passport to prizes. And with that, you'll be collecting what you need. You need to collect, ideally, all 4 for the 4 challenges and all 4 for the 4 sessions of the manufacturer's virtual trade show. And so you want to check all that out. Our next Kahoot prize coming up is going to be a DeWalt cordless drill and driver set. So there's your Kahoot code on there. What else do we need to do? We need to go to some questions.
Yeah, just if anybody has any questions, please write them down in the question and answer section of the platform we're using. We do have a couple questions here.
Okay, let's go.
All right, so someone has asked, why are carpenter's pencils flat?
Why are carpenter pencils black instead of what color? We don't know what
Flat.
they're talking about. Yeah.
Flat.
Flat. Oh, carpenter's pencil is always flat instead of being that kind of octagonal pencil that you have at school. It's because it doesn't roll off a board. Okay. Now you can't put that in a pencil sharpener. They do make special pencil sharpeners, manual ones that you slide over a couple of razor blades and it goes up on the other side. They don't work too well. It's best off with your pocket knife or your X-Acto to do it. But it also gives you a pretty wide, pretty strong blade. And as you're working with your blade, you'll notice you have 2 widths of line. You can make a big fat line by using that flat side. And so if you just want to be able to read something really well, and then when you want to mark out something, you tip it up to the side and you come down on the smaller side. But that's why carpenter's pencils are flat, so they don't roll down the hill or fall off the board. I don't know. Do they hook better behind your ear?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
There's a special pocket in my tool pouch.
Oh,
We have another question here too. It's
Yeah.
Are there screws that have an adequate shear strength comparable to nails?
No. Well, almost. There are certain screws that are made for structural steel supports that are designed for shear strength. They're like strong ties. And so they're made specifically with a thickness to go into the sheet metal, and they have more shear strength than usual. But generally, screws are much harder. And well, you know, the real easy way to see this, drive a nail and drive a screw, and then take your hammer and bend them. The screw will usually snap because it doesn't have flexibility. It has great holding strength, but it doesn't have flexibility. The nail will always bend. And that bending is what gives it more strength in the shear strength as you're coming down. So they're really made for two different things. In fact, sometimes what we'll do is drive a screw someplace where we really want long nails, but by driving the screw, we can control everything better to get it in the right position. Then we forget that screw. It doesn't count. We just drive our nails in and it just holds it for us. And so we don't have to put a clamp or something on there, because it's a lot easier if you're in an awkward position to screw in a board than to hammer it in, because you need two hands to hammer. How's that? Does that fit your experience?
Yeah, that's exactly how I've explained it as well. We got one last question. I know exactly where to find this at Home Hardware.
Okay.
But where can I find a board stretcher?
A board stretcher. Is that glue and sawdust you're looking for? you know where to find that at Home Hardware?
Yeah, usually you got to go to the yard.
Yeah, it's in the lumber pile.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, board stretcher is actually found by measuring twice and cutting once.
There you go.
That's right.
We did have one more question from the last segment that is an important one. Someone had asked about deck attachment, because I know in our video we had our deck not attached to the building, and in some places you can attach them to the building.
So you have a lot of code information on that, but
well,
you have a real reason that you like putting posts next to the building.
Yeah, in a colder climate, if you use lag bolts or anything like that, that's a big thermal bridge, and you can get a lot of frost and buildup inside your rim joist area, which can actually rot the rim joist right out. I've seen it numerous times where the deck is actually basically broken away from the building.
Okay, and so it opens up a hole. Also, if you're tight up there with the ledger board, you've got to flash it up under the siding, and that can also allow leaks and water to get in where you don't want it. You're standing out slightly apart. One other little trick in much of Canada is that if you're not attached, then it's not considered part of the house. And then it changes the whole requirements for permits. Because when you attach, it's often looked at as an addition to the house. But if you're not attaching, oh, this is a gazebo. It happens to be an inch away from the house, but it's a gazebo. So it has nothing to do with my house. But yeah, that attachment can have some legal differences as well.
Yeah.
We're all game for that? Well,
all good.
It's actually time. Let me just mention that we're going to be back at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and 3 p.m. sharp. We start right on the nose. There's no delays at this conference. And at that time, we will also find out who won the DeWalt cordless drill and driver set with the Kahoot numbers for this time. Did we get the Kahoot prize up there? Yes, we did. We got that up on the screen. I don't know. There it is again. And so this is the Kahoot for this Builders Challenge. So write that down and get that in. And I think that's about all we need. Let's get up and running, and you're off to the trade show.